It's great to have a full house for such a wonderful occasion. The non-hierarchical stacking of space is the fundamental principle that distinguishes 20th and 21st century architectural space from that of all prior eras. Thus, it is particularly compelling to see a project that decidedly calls attention to this fact, as is the case in Christian Kerez's project for the Lechenbach School. Here, long-span Vierendeel trusses are unusually arranged, not to build bridges of long spans, but rather to cantilever in a balancing act of their own making. This form of piling allows points of connection to transfer loads vertically, horizontally, and diagonally, such that we no longer have columns as normally to be expected in a boxy, stacked-up building of this size. This frame does not produce the column grid that we know to sponsor the free plan or the regularly partitioned corridor organized plan. The Vierendeel provisionally partitions some spaces as opposed to others that it leaves completely unfettered. Thus, the structure insists on defining space a priori rather than establishing a framework that lets anything go. This could perhaps be regarded as an allegory for Kerez's work and writing. In short, his theory of architecture. He calls architecture that which gives a portrait of an age and a society, a fact he accepts without value judgments. He has said that he does not consider it the task of architecture to change the world, and yet he acknowledges that he wants architecture to be, as he puts it, comprehensible, which is not always possible within the context in which architecture is situated today. His task, for him, he says his task is to convert the given constraints and conditions that are now largely devoid of meaning and are arbitrary, to convert them into architectural form. With form, he is compelled to overcome the inherent limiting conditions that are otherwise, as I said, simply arbitrary. Architecture is an experiment that, by unfolding in time, continuously illuminates new ways of thinking. Undoubtedly, on a personal note, I think it should be clear by now the reasons that I like his work so much and believe it to be so important for the pedagogy that I'm dedicated to in the school. Just to tell you a little bit about Christian Kerez, he was born in Venezuela, educated at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, where he is now the extraordinary professor of architecture. He opened his own professional practice in 1993 in Zürich, and his built works include this project, the school, the house with one wall, the apartment building in Forsterstrasse, and and two projects that he will be showing us, I believe, later tonight, housing projects in São Paulo, high-rise building in China. He is the winner of two very significant recent competitions, one for the MOMA in Warsaw and another for the Holcim Competence Center. This year, here at the GSD, he is honored with the position of holding the prestigious Tange chair. The chair honors the architect Kenzo Tange by bringing distinguished architects from around the world to the school. The professorship has been held by Alvaro Siza, Rafael Mineo, Peter Zumther, Kazuyo Sejima, Ben van Berkel, and Wang Shu, among others. It is of greatest importance to have an architect who is a profound custodian of the discipline, which is only possible today by virtue of the individuals for whom the project is a deeply personal work. Please join me in welcoming Christian Kerez.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. Actually, I would love to listen more to your introduction. It would be nice, that we could make an introduction of 1 hour and then I give a lecture of 10 minutes. just to change a little bit the rule of the game, you know, the game of a lecture. For me, it's always a bit difficult and embarrassing to find a title for a lecture, because I very much like to look for a title for each project, but I don't look for a title for all projects together, because I hope the projects are very different, one from each other. So by trying to really look at every project as a chance to overcome old projects, it's always difficult to kind of adapt to one title and put this etiquette over all projects that you have done so far. And the title, Rule of the Game, was an attempt to not kind of give a title concerning the form, the shape, or the style of a project, but to look at projects in a much more open and more abstract way. But also I like a lot to look at whatever I do in terms of inventing rules. And in this sense also consider everything I do as a project. For example, if I go to a restaurant, you know, to order something, this is also a project. And one of the problems is that you either have to be familiar, you know, with French cuisine or with Italian cuisine or even worse, Chinese cuisine. And so it's very hard to really imagine what is there written on the menu. And if you have a very clear perspective, you know, what you should get if you order something, most of the time you're disappointed. Not because it's bad, but just because it's different than what you actually imagined so hard before. So I thought actually it would be nicer, you know, if whatever you order is a surprise and you don't have any wrong expectation. And this, for example, lead to the rule that I always ordered the thing on the top of the menu card, you know, where the main dishes are at the top. And, you know, it's always kind of the same order, but it's always different. Or that if you go several times to the same place, you can always order the same as the person in front of you, you know, who just ordered. And also this, you know, makes ordering much more efficient and also provides more surprises. But also other things, you know, could be kind of regarded as a project. For example, if you go to a flower shop and you buy some flowers. So I always, when I do that, what maybe happens twice a month or so, without any particular reason. I mean, all these flowers are, of course, for my wife. Then I always kind of ask myself, you know, what could be a rule to kind of make this aesthetical object of a bunch of flowers. And I mean, to do a project with flowers is somehow, in many aspects, much nicer than to build a house. You know, first it takes less time, just a couple of minutes and not a couple of years. If you make a wrong decision, you know, it doesn't have so many consequences. The way to the lawyer is also much further. But it's also a totally different approach, because whatever you pick, you know, you will see it also in the end. And I think one of the main problems in architecture is that construction sites, they look so beautiful, but once a building is done, you know, everything vanished, everything is gone. And And even, let's say, even then, the materials that you use as an architect are maybe less seductive than flowers. So anyway, I don't remember what exactly was the rule for this bunch of flowers. I think it was to have the biggest contrast in scale, in color, and in structure of these objects, which you might call flowers. Which is also actually a quite similar concept for this one, but it was a different flower shop. This was a very restricted flower shop. You know, they didn't have a lot of variety. So I thought maybe still to have an individual appearance of the single flowers. I took all roses, but in all different colors which they had, and each color in a different number. And here, I think the rule was to take always similar colors, no matter what the scale is, the form is, and also what the price is, for example. My wife especially liked this one. Okay, there is another kind of activity. You know, work is less boring than leisure time, Charles Baudelaire once said. So maybe these rules are also a way to turn leisure time into work. This is the kind of things I watch at night. And I kind of, you know, a friend of mine told me, I'm sure that these films, they have impact on your architecture. And I said, yeah, maybe I have to ask my psychoanalyst. But I'm pretty sure, you know, after talking with her, it has absolutely no impact on the architecture. So just to prove it, I kind of collected the titles that I was watching, and fortunately I don't remember all the movies which I show you here. But basically it's more about the question, you know, what is the rule for this selection? And I think it's pure incidence, you know. First I saw a so-called good movie, and then I was getting bored, so I started something else, and then maybe too much violence, so I changed to that, and I liked it, so I thought maybe another feel-good movie. By the way, this is by Ridley Scott. And then I didn't like it that much, you know, especially because I know a lot of French wine. So I changed to violence again, you know, and I liked the taste of blood, so... but this one was really boring, so I changed again to back to feel-good movies. And then I had enough of entertainment, and I just adore Jean-Pierre Melville. And this was a German translation, so I looked it for the 6th time. And then, you know, you could say it's pure incidence, but it's not just incident, because here even if it was very late, you know, I discovered this movie here, Die bitteren Tränen der Petra von Kant from Fassbinder. And this was a movie director, I don't know why, but I had to become 50 years old, which is actually much older than Fassbinder ever got, to discover his work, and I got totally fascinated. And here's the next Fassbinder, and here I just had to wait, you know, till the order came, and now I'm just watching one Fassbinder more or less after the other. And I would say this random collection is more or less only to once in a while discover a movie director that is worth that you look every movie at least once. So even here, that I actually always thought, well, there's absolutely no system, no rule behind this kind of leisure time entertainment. There is a certain rule, and I also now realize that it's getting harder and harder to find new movie directors. Because it's not like with books where you need much more time to read a book, and it's a media which exists for over several thousand years. Maybe you are already getting a bit impatient. What has this to do with architecture? Well, I started my profession as an architect not by doing projects, but just by looking at projects. I started my profession as a photographer, and the first work which I did was a book on power plants in the mountains, and then I did a series on a military fortress in the Swiss mountains. And this is one example of this series. And of course, you could look at this project from a purely aesthetical point of view, and you would say, well, we have the context, these mountains, so maybe the project is about shaping something similar than that, you know, something metaphorical, symbolical. And then it's also done with the stones that you find in Swiss Alps with granite. So it's like a metaphorical building about mountains. But actually, it's none of that at all. Basically, here were guns, and these guns were always in the highest position, so that you had a view over soldiers attacking, and everything is in inclination, just in case a plane would drop a bomb, that it would roll down this fortress. And this material is just the closest way that you can get a really massive material which is chosen just against the force of detonation. So this object in the end, or let's say the rules that stand behind this object, have nothing to do with what maybe somebody just looking at it as an aesthetical object would think of. And also this space here, which is inside a power plant, you know, which looks maybe like out of a movie from Josef von Sternheim, with these very strong black and white contrasts. These walls, which are all bended, this one here is bended in a different way than that one, and this wall here is becoming a roof which is held on these massive columns. And it nearly looks like an expressionistic interior design. But once again, there are totally rational rules why this interior looks as it looks. And one is the wall on the back is the retention wall of this lake. And the other wall is actually like a waterfall, because if they have too much water, they will just drop the water over this engine hall, which is the actual power plant, which is built within or just behind this retention wall. So this space is a pure, let's say, consequence of totally rational, logical, economical decisions. But not only that, it is also giving a conceptual strength to this building. And this attracted me very much to these buildings of engineers. But I would say only the approach through these rules, or the approach through the knowledge, what stands behind this, let's say, aesthetical objects, makes them, for me, interesting. These pictures were also done in the 80s in Switzerland, where there was a lot of, a big debate about sensual architecture and about the perception of architecture. And then there were just very few private houses, who kind of put this discourse into practice. Of course, this totally changed in the 90s and later on. But these photographs were also like a kind of escape of this discussion, not only because they were photographs, and in this way also I could avoid to talk about architecture, but also because nobody was at that time looking at them, and they had a huge physical impact if you were visiting them, because of the scale, and also because of the site and how they changed the entire environment. So in this case, in this sense, the rule of a game could also be considered as a way of looking at things far before starting doing anything. This is a favela in São Paulo, and there is a name which is, informal architecture, which is quite, let's say, up to date. I'm very critical about this term, because I don't think that this is informal, or that this has no form or no shape. I think this is also a structure, a urbanistic structure, which actually could be reduced to certain principles. For example, here you see very well the topography that these houses are following, also out of necessity or out of economical thinking, the topography lines. This is another example, and of course it looks quite random. And at the moment I have a PhD student who is making a research project to find a typological approach on the favela. And he made this plan. This is actually the same plot as you have seen in the picture before. And I think it's quite astonishing, how random the favela looks from, let's say, the perspective of a helicopter. But if you have the perspective how people are living there, how they organize their own life, it looks quite regular. You can see certain patterns, how people living there organize themselves, how they organize the approaches to the house, and so on. So we are now studying and working on the question, what are the formal rules in the so-called informal settlements? There's another reason why we are very much interested in favelas. If you compare, let's say, a settlement from urbanism, Gropiusstadt in Berlin, at the bottom, and on top, Parisopolis in São Paulo, it's quite astonishing that the floor area ratio is much higher in Parisopolis. It's 1.7 instead of 1.3. And still, you could say this is a city which is extremely cheap, which is very dynamic, which is constantly changing, and which is also built for much more people, which is much more efficient than the example of modernism, which you see at the bottom. So, I mean, there are a lot of reasons why favela should not just be kind of regarded as the reason for drug traffic and other social problems. But beyond that, well, this is a picture of people working on housing, on social housing in the favela. This is my boss, Elisabeth Cifrancia, and they are now looking for new models, how to upgrade the favela. They are collaborating with different schools, with different architects from all over the world. And also, maybe also incidentally, they asked me to make a proposal for upgrading of a favela. And I always heard from my mother, who's Brazilian, you know, that the favela is the place that you get shot right away, that you enter this place. So it sounded pretty interesting to me. And I spent 2 weeks just sightseeing. And I was actually struck by the beauty of this place. I mean, you have everything which you have in also a big city, like gardens, but just in an atomized scale. You have very individualistic housing. Even if people are living on top of each other or just behind each other, everyone has a private access to his own house and has a direct connection to the public life on the street. So here you would not even see the houses anymore, you would just see one entrance next to the other. The borderline to the private rooms, they are not really clear. You always have these verandas where they have plants, laundry. If they are at home, they just open the gate and they put the chair here. So the house starts right away, you know, at the border of the street. But beyond that, there is a variety of labyrinthic spaces which is absolutely amazing. And they might be all very small and not impressive by size. But what is really impressive is the richness of different types that you have, of different spaces, and you never know how will the space, the urban space, look next when you are wandering through a favela. Of course, a lot of the spaces are really extremely narrow, and it's also obvious that some parts in a favela are really unhealthy and in risk areas and whatever. But beyond that, there is also a quality in the favela which might, get lost in social housing. This is an example from the 70s for Singapura. Singapura is the name that the favelados give to social housing projects. Don't ask me why. So we thought in a different way about this social housing project. We thought it's maybe nice if these spaces are random, but they are connected and they could be repeated, like in a ornament of a carpet or of a kimono, or in a painting. This is from Mondrian, Joseph Frank. This is an ancient kimono, and that maybe the urban space could be much more organic or much more differentiated, but still follow a certain pattern, a certain structure. This is how we started. This is more or less a study for density. Actually, these are all single-family houses, which was not possible, as you can see here. So we introduced some houses where you have one apartment on top of each other, or also some apartment blocks. And if you arrange them as you saw in this density study, you would get something like this, which, why not? It's also a nice pattern, isn't it? But if you think of this pattern in terms of, what could be the meaning of this outside space, and for example, you think, well, maybe these are private spaces, these are public spaces, then besides two leftovers, or maybe three leftovers, you don't have a lot of variety. And you don't have a lot of generosity. Every garden would be very narrow and close to the next garden. So we thought maybe it's nicer to have a different arrangement, like this one. I don't know how to call this order. Maybe it's not really an order. But if you look at it, or if you imagine that this outside space could consist of private alleys, private garden, public alleys, public squares, then you see that this option offers much more variety in spaces, and also offers more large open squares than the other order. So I would say there is also a clear advantage in this arrangement of houses. Nevertheless, it's not really, let's say, organic or informal or something like this. More or less, you always have the same types of houses. Each color is one different type of housing. And as you can count the colors, there are not more than 7 different houses. They are just arranged in many different ways to create a richness in the urban pattern. And this becomes especially evident if you don't think of it in the surface of a graphic design, but in terms of a model. And this is actually also the model that came long before we did these abstract drawings. And this was also the way how we started to imagine the outside space. And we are also thinking that each house, has a private terrace on top. and that you have a lot of public squares and alley on the ground floors. As you can see here in these models. This was the very first conceptual study we did. You know, we thought it's nice if these buildings would be 40 centimeters next to each other. But now we changed that scheme a little bit because this will be the first legal favela ever built by a Swiss architect in São Paulo. And so it has to fulfill all rules and regulations given by fire security, by ventilation codes, by building codes, and so on. This would be the facade, very rough, very monolithic. Wandering through Boston, we thought actually also the floor could be made out of brick stones. Now we are working on the building application. This is a calculation for areas for handicapped people and for public squares. And this is a first impression of the facades. And we hope to finalize this building application within the next 3 weeks. This is the site for the apartment house on Forsterstrasse, for the best client I ever had in my life, my mother. And the area is very nice. There are a lot of trees and gardens. There are also some houses. They are not so nice actually. But if you ever have the luck or the bad luck to build a bit on the outside of a city, I don't know if it makes a lot of sense to think about urbanism or context or anything like that, because so many things are already given by the building code. And this is a scheme, you know, what you can do on a plot like that. And actually everything was given in our case. This is the building application. The only choice, you know, was to make a rectangular form, that it's, you know, that it's like the other buildings, a box, and that the longer side looks to the sea, to the lake, and the whole design actually became like an interior design because the shape was given, so the idea was to not kind of stay within these boundaries and accept a given volumetry, but to not think of this house as a volume at all, but just as a structure. Built out of slabs and built out of walls. And this was the working model which was actually there before we even started to work on any drawings. And as you can see, the walls, they have different lengths, so they could be combined in different forms, and you could combine them in different ways. And I would say one of the rules for this house was also to kind of escape the given boundary in many ways, not only by not having any facade made out of massive walls, but only made out of glass walls, but also to have the biggest extension possible in terms of views, that you always see through the entire a floor plan in every direction. And it also became a very difficult work for our engineer. Actually, we had to change 3 times the engineer. But now we have the best. His name is Joseph Schwarz. And he was really looking for challenges. So since we didn't want to implement any other elements in this design, just walls, there was like a structure where, for example, in this huge room, which is 12 meters long, you would need a column, but you don't, because this ceiling is hanging on this wall, and this wall is extended from this wall, and so on and so on. So all these walls, they are connected with each other. If you would change the position of one wall, you would have to change the position of all the other walls as well. The floor plan which interested us the most was the cellar. Not because it is very important in terms of program, but because you had at the bottom a garage, and on top you had these apartments, and the big question was what to do in between. And the cellar in this house is like a hanging bridge over a void space, so that this structure of slabs and walls is like put on the inversion of a podium, of a pedestal. You see here all these pre-stressing cables which were important to hold the walls and to stick it to the outside wall. And the cellar was also like the breaking point, you know, where maybe this house is not anymore faithful to its own rules, and it's just, you know, let's say decoration of what you see on top, but you don't think about what, you know, what is really the basement, what is the fundament of this house. This is the project when it was finished. Now you don't see nearly nothing because of the trees. You see, I like trees more than houses. Yeah, actually it looks still pretty much like the first conceptual model made out of cardboard. If you enter the apartments, you don't see outside, you just see the light and the color of the environment in the reflection. And then these walls are put in a position that they are overlap always, so that you also can look through these different walls from one side of the apartment to the other, to have the biggest possible extension. And this, let's say, rigidity of the rule, just use walls, nothing else than that, to define the space, is not a self-evident principle, but it's much more a way how to connect small and big spaces, dark and bright spaces, extroverted and introverted spaces. You can also live in this apartment, which is hard to imagine for every Swiss architect. But we live now for 9 years, and it's nice because you can look outside. And you see how the garden is changing, how the seasons are changing. you know, and even if you have some curtains because, I don't know, you don't want to see outside, even then, you know, the impact from the outside is very important. I had about 5 possible clients, you know, when we finished this project, and they came to the office and said, we like that, we would like to have something for us. And then I always told them, well, this is just, I did it once in a lifetime, never again. It's done. For me, architecture is an adventure, it's an experiment. And out of these 5, 4 never appeared again. And there was one courageous couple, you know, that said, wow, adventure, yes, this sounds exciting. I guess sometimes they regretted it, but not in the end. That's what counts, you know, not once the building was finished. Since I was not so sure after 4 clients left me already, you know, if the 5th clients will stay, I thought we should not invest too much time, you know, and just provoke him a little bit. With a very simple idea, you know, just one rule for this house. And the house is for 2 apartments actually, and all you need to have a house for 2 families is a wall dividing the floor plan into 2. So this is already the title of the project and the concept of this project, House with One Wall. And on each level you have one wall, and this wall is folded that it cannot fall down. Yeah, and you could even say this project is so simple, you just have to draw a line and then it's finished. So I was hoping somebody would do it for me. And this is one example. Maybe, you know, a curved line would be nice. But then there's a little problem. Fire escape, you know, stair can never follow a curved wall, so doesn't work. Nice, but it doesn't work. So we thought maybe it would be interesting if this wall would, you know, not touch here, always cut the house into 2, but maybe be more elaborate. But then these spaces were too small to be useful. And so on and so on. So there were, I don't know, dozens of variations just of this one line. And in the end, this was the floor plan after, I don't know, 3 months, I think. This is the living room, you know, which we thought should be the most generous space. So the bending is the slightest possible, you know, that you have as much space as possible. But of course, because it's a small house, it's only generous in 1 dimension, not in 2, not in 3, just in 1, the length. This floor plan was very different because it had to also find a place for the bathroom, which is here, which is a niche in this wall, which could also be considered like that. And then these 2 floor plans, they were pretty clear for me, you know, how they had to be. And the third one, I really, you know, here at the end you have a technical space, there is some storage room, and the rest was, let's say, just the rest. And the beginning of the house. And maybe the most important thing was the stair. This is the last model which we did, which is a different scale, not 1:33, but 1:10, and also instead of 2 kilos, it's 800 kilos. This is the outside, just some cladding with aluminium panels, where you have the structure, all the rest sliding doors. So in this design process, the most important instrument to create generosity was the staircase, which was connecting all the 3 levels. So the walls, they are always in the same position where they are next to the staircase. And this is also let's say, very monumental gesture and a monumental perspective in a otherwise very small, very modest house. This is the other apartment. Even if it looks the same on the picture, it's the inversion. Concave becomes convex, etc., etc. And these spaces, they are just defined by the folding of the wall. This, I would say, is like the basic principle of this house. This is the bedroom. Bedroom on the other side, which goes to another view. This is the site for Holcim Competence Center, a competition that we won 2 years ago and never heard again about it. I still hope for the phone call tomorrow. It's not too late, I'm still ready. And basically, it was a headquarter of a huge company which produces concrete all over the world. The village where it all started is a bit arbitrary. But in this landscape, you have amazing buildings like these factories. So I thought it would be nice if this headquarter also would have a scale like these old storage buildings from the same company. And the question was how to implement the program in this deep and high volume. This is the model which represents, let's say, the rule, how this project was shaped, maybe in the purest way. And you see here, this is the diameter for vertical light wells. And they all have a number and a scale, a size. And as you can see, they go into different directions. So the idea was, it's only interesting, if you put so many different parts of a program like education, research, administration together, if you also are aware of that, if you have a view from one compartment to the other. So therefore, I made views through the entire building with light wells, so that you are aware of the entire complexity of this house. This is a volumetric study of these light wells, how they interfere with each other. And maybe it looks quite random, but it's actually not. This is the feasibility study that was given, and this is also how most competition projects in Switzerland look like. But not this one, I must say. There were a lot of very interesting entries. So, as you can see, on the ground floor you have different workshops, and you only have very few openings. Then here you have research laboratories with already, let's say, 3 or 4 zenithal light wells. And then where you have the big auditorium, they are all put together in one area, etc., etc. So the position is always different from one to the other, and this also has functional reasons. So that we could implement, besides the given spaces, also open spaces where people could meet, also around these light wells. This, for example, is the top floor for the management with meeting rooms with zenithal light. And the structure is extremely simple. You just have perpendicular columns on the inside. And I show you this structure in a movie. Basically, it's just slabs and columns, that's it. But then you have these holes, and because of that, you know, you don't have any more straight columns. And because of this inclination, we thought it's better to have perpendicular columns. But of course, they cannot stiffen the building. This is when the wind would blow. So we thought we need also some columns on the outside, but these columns are totally different. They are massive, they are connected with the slabs, and they are also in an inclination, but for a very different reason. Because here it's important that these columns meet in several points, because the more points you have where these columns come together, the more you can reduce the size of these inclined columns. And they also follow the direction of the fire escape stairs, which is outside the building. This was one day before giving in the competition, and then we got a phone call from Scott if he could visit the office. And we were quite stressed, but it turned out that we had a very actually distracting discussion about how irrational this project is that should actually supposed to be Swiss engineering building. And I totally agree, you know, but I would say there are 2 elements in this project. One is the basic structure of columns and slabs, which is basically a very rational system, but then you have these holes, and these holes are totally weird, you know, and it's like if you shoot with a shotgun through a rational structure, but I think it's also, you know, it opens different perspectives in an otherwise very rational building. And I wouldn't know which aspect, let's say, the aspect of having just a building with slab and columns, this rational approach is more important, or this, let's say, Baroque or surreal aspect of the building matters more. These are some camera movements to show how this space, you know, would always change the perception if you would move around it. They were done in very short time. But since I believe that you never can really know what the building will look like in reality, I hate renderings. I think these very rough sketches of this interior are maybe more faithful because they don't pretend to be reality. And it also gives a variety of impressions on each level of the same building. Very shortly after, we had to give in a second competition. This time, the headquarters of an insurance company at the border of the lake of Zürich, Swiss Re. And it should replace this building, which I think actually is quite good, from the 70s. So, and they also wanted a bit extended program. And I proposed a building, you know, slightly bigger than that one. That you see that this is the new headquarters and this is the old one. Needless to say that we didn't win. But actually, you know, what I wanted to do is that. This is from the same company, Swiss Re, a building in London by Foster. I don't know exactly what the symbolism is of that. But anyway, you know, if you imagine that this is kind of not the headquarters, but this should be the headquarters, it's very much a challenge. You know, how could this small building become more important? I mean, scale is not the only thing. So I thought it would be nice, you know, if we have on the exterior a structure which is not just one slab after the other, but which is a structure which goes over the entire height of the building, which is a monumental order, and not an order given by these slabs. And also not, let's say, an order like in other buildings that is just on the outside of the building, it's just a structure of the facade. No, I thought it would be nice if this would go inside the building, and then I put these nails into the foam glass, like a voodoo model, you know, hoping that something comes out of it. We actually thought there is one element, and this is the core, you know, the staircase, which you need, of course, in every building, which could develop from one facade to the other, and then be reflected and turn again till it reaches the last floor. That it's like if you play pool, you know, and the ball is reflected by the borderline, because the stair cannot go out the building, you know, and then come back. So it has to kind of turn here. But this is the biggest possible extension that you could have with a staircase. And these are like sets of a game, you know. The rule is the same, but the game is always a bit different one. I think, yeah, we decided for that one. Yeah, I think it was the fire police, who made the decision easy, so that it's also not an aesthetical decision. And basically, it's a very old principle that you have cores and then you have suspended wires on the outside, but here the cores, they touch in the last level, the facade. So the suspension wires are only in the facade, which is much nicer than all these 60s buildings. And if you are the manager of Swiss Re, you have a nice walk each morning. And it's really like a, promenade architectural. With a lot of training, you would have this speed. And besides that, each level is different because the arrangement, of course, is also always a bit different. And each slab is like a fragment of the entire structure. That was, again, the model 1 to 33, and you see here the steel wires that are holding the slabs at the exterior, and this would allow you to have a view over the lake of Zürich without any disturbing columns. And this totally open view would relate to this very heavy course in inclination. And since you can walk on these tubes, you could also change, the way always. Which is especially important if you work on the top. The site of the school in Leutschenbach was actually, at the beginning, it looked huge, and the neighborhood is quite rough. You have a power plant that burns trash, you have speed train and traffic and so on. The only quality was that it's big, and to kind of keep this size, we were thinking of a way to connect all parts of the program with each other in one entire gesture. And this steel structure already indicates all the parts of the program that you have. Here on the sides you have the classrooms. Here is the entrance with cafeteria. Here public rooms, auditorium and library. And on top there's the gymnastic hall. And they all depend on each other. It's not like a collage where you have a different scenography from one level to the other. But it's just a differentiation in space. And these were studies which we did when we were looking how to bring closer the facade to the structure. So even if the program was given, it was a long research to come as close as possible to this given arrangement of space. And the structural model is not, let's say, just the invention or a diagram. It's also a built reality, as you can see on this picture. And as you can see that the slabs of the first 3 levels with the classrooms, they are hanging on the 4th level, so that the entire surface is open to the outside from the entrance level. Yeah, it still holds. So this is the ground floor. also the lowest ceiling, just 2.50 meters, that you have that you can feel the weight of this building and have a stronger relationship to the outside. The school has big halls, and each classroom is entered through a hall like this. And in the middle is a double-sided staircase which separates the area for the smaller and bigger children. It's all done with the same material, you know, all the slabs are concrete, all the walls are translucent glass, even the handrails of the stairs are done with the same material. But this is not kind of a question of taste. This is not minimalism, you know. This is more to enhance that the difference between the levels is the space. And not any, let's say, scenographic elements or symbolic elements. And this fourth floor, for example, is exactly the opposite of the ground floor. You know, on the ground floor you have a core, and that outside of this core everything is open and free. And on the fourth level you have just the open interior, and everything else is divided and closed. So these spaces could not be more different, even if they are done exactly with the same material. And this is the gymnastic hall, from where you have a view even to the old town of Zürich. And the facade is also like the interior, just done out of glass, but this time it's translucent glass. So that it's also evident, even after the construction, that this is a building made out of steel. You could not do it with any other material. And this becomes evident not through any sensual aspects, you know, because the surface of the steel is covered with grey paint, and the grey paint is exactly the same grey as the concrete, so that we could avoid any sensual decision. And the neighbors, they love it, the kids love it, Swiss architects hate it. I actually ruined my career in Switzerland with this building. Because now, maybe some rules if you ever work in Switzerland. First, it doesn't matter how expensive a building is, it just should not look expensive. If you make grades, you know, this is, I would say, there are 2/3 of school buildings in Zurich which are more expensive than that one. But the problem is it looks expensive. So there are rumors it's 3 times more expensive than what it should be. And then, yeah, if you make something extraordinary, do it, you know, where it belongs to. With a museum, it's okay. But with a schoolhouse, you know, in the suburbia, maybe it's a problem. At least for some architects. Okay. Is this online? Can also, but now in Switzerland it's 1:30, right? So I think nobody will hear it. This is the last project which I'm going to show you. It's a building in China, 120 meters high, which is, you know, the height of the tallest building in Switzerland. So for me, it meant a lot, 120 meters. These studies might look very random, but in fact, what we were looking for is, you know, once you can do a building with 120 meters, you know, what makes this building different to, let's say, a building which only has one level? If you copy-paste a floor plan 30 times, you know, you just could make a building with one floor. You don't need 30 floor plans for that. So we were looking for, you know, what could give evidence to this program. And this is a diagram, and it shows the weight of the building. This is the top floor. So this is the weight of the building on the top floor. This is the ground floor, and this is the weight of the building on the ground floor. So with the height, the weight of the building increases. Very simple. It's a simple rule of the game. And of course, you cannot change every level, the structure. You know, this is just too complicated. But we had some given zones by a master plan. So we thought it's maybe nice if we have a structure in this high zone and then another one in the middle zone, etc., etc. So that we have columns which start here in the high zone, they go down here, and then we have some additional columns just here in the lower area. So instead of increasing the dimension of the column, we increase the number of columns. And this, you know, as a result out of that, you can make a high-rise building with very slim columns, like 35 centimeters, which is for 120 meters quite okay. So to keep this dimension, we thought it would be shame to implement a stiffening core inside the building and make it massive again. So we thought it's maybe nicer to have like flagpoles, you know, to have wires on the outside of the facade. And then again, for each zone, for each structure, you not only have a different grid of beams, but you also have a different net of stiffening wires. And these are all the nets there are, and this is how it looks if you put them one on top of each other. This would be the perspective from the airplane. And we made a model. And you see the density of structural element changes with the height. And in this sense, this is not a, you know, invention, you know, to make an iconographic building or so. This is just giving evidence to what there is already, that you have different conditions here than here. This is our client. Actually, it was on the lottery day, so I unfortunately missed it. He was working 8 years in Japan, in the office of Kikutake. And yeah, I'm very excited how this project will go on. We have to make some changes within the next 6 weeks. Coming back to the project, this is the ground floor, this is the top floor, and you see how very smoothly the facade is changing from one level to the other. But there are also, let's say, some selling points, you know, for this concept. One is you can look through the building. There's not this massive core in the middle. So you can look through every direction, which would be especially nice in an open office space. The other thing, since you don't have a core in the middle, you could also have a huge reception hall here. Around it, some retail. You could have an open atrium on top, a big auditorium for a couple of hundred people. And the structure's very simple, like a tent, you know, from a circus, just in a different scale. And we did a little movie to illustrate this concept. This plan is from Kurokawa, and now Isozaki is actually the head of the planning committee. It's like the Forbidden City. It's like an island, but in the middle there is again a lake, and there is a specific transportation system. And what I like is that there is like an outside space, just when you enter the plot, you know, even before you enter the building, you are underneath this ceiling of wires, and you are in a space in between street and house. And then when you enter, you have this open hall. All the elevators could be glazed. This is a view from elevator. We imagine all the offices are also glazed. At least it's possible. And this is the atrium on the 27th level, surrounded by the bar and cafeteria, which gives you a view over the surrounding. And these wires might also be interesting for the illumination. We have 3 concepts for choice. The first was called waterfall, the second light ball, and this we called robe or dress. Or, nice, huh? Thank you very much. Yeah, sure. Are there any questions? Maybe I was already too long. I heard that Harvard students like to ask questions. But maybe this is just a rumor.
You mentioned at the very beginning of your presentation that in the 80s there was this idea of sensuality coming into Swiss architecture. Mm-hmm. I could particularly see that in your process models. Do you yourself think that you have this whole variety, this whole palette of materials you use as a jumping off point when you start designing because of the 80s, and what the ideas were at the time, or is that just personal?
Yeah. No, I mean, of course, there was a big impact from people like Herzog Dömeron or Peter Zumthor at that time, and their work impressed me a lot. But you know, if you love something or somebody, you know, it could also be a kind of respect. So, on the other hand, if you respect somebody, you cannot do what he's already doing. So, even if I appreciate a lot their work, and I did even more when I left university, and this also gave me a belief that it's possible, that it's still possible to become an architect. I just thought that they did it already so good, you know, didn't leave me any space for this sensual approach. So maybe this is still in the architecture, you know, that also, let's say, the concrete on Forsterstrasse was done with plenty of effort, just because we were afraid that in this rich neighborhood people would put plaster on concrete if it would be rough. So it was more like a strategy to make this material survive the context. And for us it was important to keep this notion of concrete because this building could not be done with another material. But the sensuality for me is never the starting point, you know, it's just the point where I get at the very end of a design process. So if you take the example of Forsterstrasse, first came the idea what to do with the space, then out of that came the structure, then out of that came the material, and then out of that came the importance, you know, how to treat the material, that it can kind of be kept also if you sell these apartments. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have a question, really simple one. That for you, every project is important to have the logic. And you once, okay, every project has too important to have the logic.
Yeah.
And you also claim that the opposite of beautiful is not ugly, it's the randomness. And the question is, I think maybe a year ago you changed the design of your website. And then there's a function called, no, there's one called random.
Yeah.
And then everything is just random. I'm just wondering what's the idea behind this random?
Oh, you know, the homepage. Basically, I have a web designer. And the only idea, you know, which I even have to admit it's not done very properly, you know, is that we show on the homepage material that we usually don't show. So that you, it's a bit like a basket or, you know, like a Dropbox or something. And actually also the first pictures I showed you from the flowers and DVDs is something that is just perfect for the website. And it was done also in preparation for that. But this random, I think that not every order is logical, you know, or for example, the project for the Favela. I mean, it's hard for me to tell what is precisely the order of that. But we were really carefully thinking about how it is to live there and imagining squares and alleys and streets and thinking about kind of a variety and rhythm if you go through this. But it's done very much by intuition, you know. It's not very rational, this structure. But nevertheless, I think it is also a certain order, but more a complex order, you know. I think an order is not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, an order is more. I would say this set of rules. You know, that also kind of attach you to certain rigid rules, but also give you a freedom because you can improvise with these rules or you can differentiate within these rules. Yes, yeah. No, but I must say, really, we had a web designer because I'm 50 years old, you know. I heard about the internet. I know it exists. But I like movies, I like books, I like discs, but I rarely surf in the internet. So, you know, I gave it to a guy with tattoos and I thought he's just perfect for the job. Okay, yeah.
As a result of the World Trade Center, the cores of the U.S. buildings are extremely solid and made of concrete. So I'm wondering how you can manage to make a non-core building.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you could also, there are also some examples how the facade is like a core, this tube-in-tube construction, which SOM did a lot of these buildings. This is another structural approach. For me, it was amazing to kind of have a high building in an open field. And I think a lot of the buildings in the USA, they are really in very dense situations, and they are also following very complicated building codes. I heard that even the lawyer is more important than the structural engineer if you want to build a high-rise building in the States. I don't know if it's true. But I could imagine that maybe this is only an option, you know, if you have an open field and a huge plot around a high building. And these wires are also about this surrounding. But now we also have some difficulties with fire escape regulations. So maybe the design will change a lot. And we are thinking, you know, to keep the principle that is, or the starting point that is that we kind of want to give evidence about the changing conditions within a high-rise building. But to be very honest, we don't know at all how to do it at the moment. But I hope in 6 weeks we could show you how it can be done without wires.
I have two questions about the, I'm all the way up from the top, about the game model of practicing architecture. So if every project has a set of rules that you set for it, do you ever take pleasure in breaking those rules? And the other question would be, if every project has its own set of rules that are distinct from each other, would you admit you have strategies that continue from project to project, how you solve each rule?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think breaking the rules, you know, is the biggest fun. And some of the rules are also kind of there to break others. And still to, you know, not do something crazy or wild or whatever, but just to have another logic, another referential system. But I would say there is no rule that you cannot break as an architect, because if you would do a scheme or a sculpture, you know, you maybe really can follow your own rules, but probably this would also make it a bit boring. I think in architecture to implement rules is also interesting because you have so many requirements. It's really a profession for masochists and for slaves, you know. And the question is always, if you kind of try to establish your own rules, how far can you go with them? And I'm always interested in this breaking point, you know. But I think it's also the beauty that that there is a point where you cannot go beyond, or where a system breaks or cannot be followed any further. And I would not say that this is compromising a system, but more that this is like extending a system. and that it also becomes gets more deepness and more layers. So I'm very much interested into this question. Fernando Pessoa once said, you know, that people adore perfection because they are not perfect. And there is nothing as opposite to human being as perfection. But to kind of reach after perfection, knowing that you cannot entirely fulfill it, you know, I think this is the kind of adventurous or exciting starting point. And I think if you would really believe these rules, you know, I think this would be naive. Or if you really would believe there is something like perfection, especially in architecture, this would be a terrible misunderstanding. So I certainly don't believe that, but because I think it's impossible, I think it's also the only interesting thing, you know. To do something possible is not so interesting as to do or to achieve something impossible. And what was the second question?
The second was if every project had its own set of rules that you try not to repeat the same rules twice. Do you think there are strategies that you have that you take from project to project, ways to approach the rules?
Yes. You know, it's always a question: are you the victim of your circumstances, or are you the reason for your circumstances? And I prefer not to consider myself as a victim. So I have not a lot of commissions, you know. I work very slowly, so I don't do a lot of projects. So out of that, one of the things which I try to do is really to take each project as a starting point for something entirely different, you know. If I would have, I don't know, 300 employees and 50 projects and 20 I know from them, maybe, you know, I would kind of work more with variations on subjects and with kind of strategies. But I would say my only strategy is that I always try to start from the scratch. If I manage or not is another question.
It looks like in your build projects, you've been able to maintain an incredible amount of faithfulness to your original concept, whether it's structural or spatial. And I'm wondering, working internationally in a place like China, there's an inevitability of things being lost in translation. Literally, you have to have an LDI to build something in China. And I'm wondering what kind of experience you've had having to play by someone else's rules, as in the rules of a different country. And also, where in China is it and who's your client?
We are building, or we are planning in the capital of Henan, Chengzhou, which is right in the middle of China. And of course, this will be a challenge, you know. And I always think that whatever conditions you work in, you know, you have to take them as a starting point and find a way how to overcome these conditions. And if you are working always within the same framework, there is no reason to change. There is no reason to change strategies. So I, you know, when I did this school, with one exception, I never again participated in any school competition. Just because I think it wouldn't make me think, you know, of other things. I'm also, even if I built with some friends one new museum and won another competition for another museum, I mean, it's not that interesting to build a museum. I mean, every commission is interesting, you know, especially if you think it's the first and only time in your life that you have this commission. And if I will with my you know, Swiss experience survive other conditions, I don't know. But I'm more looking for adventure than for anything else. So I'm glad also for this risk. But it's something which I'm thinking about, but I haven't come to absolutely clear conclusions. I have to go? Okay, good. Unfortunately, we have to go. Scott is very sorry and I'm very hungry.